So, as we all are well aware at this point, building characters in Destiny Rising can be rather taxing, especially on the material front regarding the exotic materials and especially the artifacts that you need for your character builds. Especially so for the people who are wanting to complete Calamity Ops and the Expanse and get the most rewards from them so that they can level up their characters even further and take them to their highest levels. So due to the nature of this video, I will be covering more of the Calamity Ops and Expanse and other sort of endgame and challenges. So this is less so for the people who play this game like a digital action figure collecting game, bringing their favorite characters into the Heroic Strike playlist and patrol. I'd be willing to estimate that about 9 out of 10 a complete failure from the onset simply due to a failure in the planning phase. What I mean by the planning phase, I mean about character builds and also team building. I'm here to give you the best tips to build up your own account as well as your teammates for success in future Calamity Ops runs, as well as the Expanse, so you can get the absolute most out of these rewards for the activities, earn even more clusters, infusion cores, and Lumia Leaves for the future in this title. So, going off of what we already know in Destiny Rising, 2 primary things that you want in order to play in Endgame and to excel in it, to get the full clears in the Expanse, and that means a sub 7-minute run in the Expanse on both sides, and also getting high score runs in Calamity Ops so that you can at the very least hit the score thresholds for the instant promotion, taking you all the way up to Master 1 or even higher, especially because all of the best players are likely already in Master 2. If you are looking to compete and get all the way up to Master 2, now would be the time to start going for it, as those lower ranks will be much less competitive. Where if you are actually getting the instant promotions all the way up to Master 1, you would likely be favored to rank up to Master 2 regardless. As we already know, when it comes to Calamity Ops and Expanse specifically in Destiny Rising, these activities are heavily favored towards the newest units, with the only real outlier for these 2 activities being a character like Ningfei, who is a movement unit. When it comes to the characters that we would want to bring into the Calamity Ops and Expanse runs, they are going to essentially be narrowed down to the best movement unit, the previous limited unit, and the current limited unit. And outside of those 3 characters, with some levels of variance depending on how good the limited characters they put out are, they're going to be, and especially due to the fact that we have already seen them be very much so willing to power creep older units with the addition of Hellhest, it's very likely that the disparity of the newer units compared to the older ones, especially with how tailored these endgames are to the new units it's very likely that we are going to see a widening gap between the units that we currently have in the game and the featured limited units going forward. The primary way that I'm going to suggest you plan your future endgame runs going forward is going to be what I call the round robin strategy. And what I essentially mean by that is it would be you and 2 other members in your main group that you are going to be planning on running Calamity Ops with on a regular basis. And you can even upscale this a little bit further with more people. The individual roles you all have will largely be the same. What those roles essentially would be is that you'll have people who will prioritize the movement unit, and these guys are going to be the most important people in your team and will likely be covering the majority of the runs within your group. So your best players should be wielding the movement units primarily. And then of course you're going to have 2 other people who are going to alternate collecting the limited units. So what I essentially mean by that is currently the primary movement unit we have is going to be Ningfei. We already know that Ningfei is very much the apex character in this title. Even in Expanses and Calamity Opses where there weren't any arc shields and it's just rapid fire stuff, and even stuff that doesn't even have rapid fire Shinkas, Ningfei is consistently a top performer simply due to the fact that he is a extremely fast and extremely potent unit in Destiny Rising. Though, with the addition of Hellhest and this particular Expanse, we are starting to see the devs take measures to make sure that the newer units are being given an even weightier advantage for their particular run. But even with that, Ningfei is still able to keep up. Still very, very apparent that movement is so supremely important in this title, because we have a character who is limited, such as Estella, who has already been pushed out of her own endgame twice now, simply because she moves like a brick. There isn't even a single Estella in the entire top 15 of her expanse this reset. And granted, that is probably due to the fact that they removed all the ability cards, and this is a much more weapon-focused expanse. With that context in mind, it's not necessarily as bad as it was prior, when Ningfei was still topping the expanse with ability cards that were completely unnerved. The same exact thing has happened again with the current Calamity Ops, just as it happened with the previous one. They are running double Ningfei over an Estella, with the addition of Hellhest to not only provide heavy ammo support, but also to nuke Shinkas and break their shields really, really fast, especially now that the Hellhests have been properly built and are being properly piloted. You can clearly see that their personal damage is still extremely high, matching somewhat similar to the Gwyn's we saw in the top spots in the Calamity Ops prior. When it comes to characters who do not have movement in their kit, it's likely going to be relatively iffy on how good they are going to be for future endgames. And that's why I say the movement units are going to be the most important role. Now, the other two types of people, they're going to be covering the featured units. Basically, with the exception of Estella, basically every single new unit who actually does at least decent mobility, such as Hellhest. Obviously, those who cover Shinkas other than rapid fire Shinkas, because Ningfei very solidly has that covered. But obviously, if there is a new unit that does power creep Ningfei, then whatever Shinka that the movement unit covers will likely be a lot less necessary for a future featured unit compared to something that would be like Hellhest or Gwyn, who covers the other Shinka that Ningfei would have a bit more of a difficult time with compared to the rapid fires, or any speculated future limited unit. So you're going to have like one person taking a role, which is going to be the movement unit, one person who takes the role of one of the limited units, and then the other person taking the role of the other limited unit. And these two people are essentially going to be alternating between the first limited unit and the next limited unit, depending on how good they're going to be, especially when we're factoring in key parts of their kit, such as mobility. Let's say the next mythic unit would be Maru. So this guy would take Maru and skip the one coming after, and this guy would skip Maru and take the second limited unit coming in the patch. What that essentially allows them to do is to hyper-focus an extra month's worth of pulls and materials into that singular limited unit, taking their potential even higher than they were before. And this is largely going to be the most resource-efficient strategy, especially when we're factoring in free-to-plays to low spenders, because the amount of pulls that you're able to get is going to very much determine how powerful you can make these units. And additionally, skipping every other unit would additionally benefit them more. That allows you to be a lot more resource efficient with your pinnacle energy spending, because you're getting more weekly claims for items such as infusion cores, and also other things such as through the shifting gates exchange, meaning that you can be significantly more efficient with spending your pinnacle energy, allowing you to further invest that excess energy into stuff such as their artifact, which will largely be a wider gap in power between putting more energy into, let's say, more infusion cores for building a character that you probably won't even use in the end games. Now, when it comes to the alternate guys, the people who are picking up a unit every other patch, obviously it will benefit them immensely to have the movement units as well, simply because they will probably be the most versatile ones for clearing the other side of the expanse that they're not going to have the featured unit for. Primary goal is going to be in Calamity Ops rather than going for expanse leaderboards, because the leaderboards in the Calamity Ops are tied to your actual reward gain, and the expanse is largely just for bragging rights. So obviously when it comes to the people who are alternating, skipping and then pulling, the primary thing that you guys are going to be doing is you'll be spending your pinnacle energy on stuff such as Exotic Infusion Cores, the other base materials that you're going to need to build up your characters, and then once you get to the release of the character that you're going to be investing in, you're then going to swap your pinnacle energy spending to chaos in order to get their artifact sets to the best possible status. And if you're looking for a guide on how to level up artifacts efficiently, I have that also in my channel, so be sure to check that out. The reason why you'd want to wait in order to start building artifacts and spend your energy on those is because we already know when it comes to future released characters such as Hellhest, they are very likely going to be putting out new artifacts such as United Axiom, which will largely be a much better option for the character than the artifacts that we already have. It will be very difficult to pre-farm artifacts for a character when you do not know anything about their kit whatsoever. One of the main ways that you'd be able to do this, and this is more so for the low spenders, is you'd save your pinnacle energy reserves, your blue pinnacle energy, for that artifact grinding and spend all of your gold pinnacle energy exclusively on getting your materials at least prior to the character's release. What this will also allow you to do is maximize the amount of high stat artifacts that you're able to get that are on set for the character, because the only way to get a base high stat artifact is through spending pinnacle energy, and these high stat artifacts can save you a ton in terms of refactoring material. Getting an artifact that is base 190 or higher, especially over base 200 attribute score, is going to be a significantly higher bonus to your resource efficiency compared to getting an artifact that has perfect attributes, but you have to level it up to that point. Now, obviously, I have been talking a lot about the people who would be tasked with essentially alternating, like skipping and then pulling, and then skipping and then pulling, or even skipping twice if it is a character who is very likely and proven to be pushed out of endgame activities, such as Estella, due to the lack of mobility in their kit. But there was one primary role that I have said is the most important, but haven't really talked about a lot when it comes to the planning phase. And obviously, the person who's maining the movement unit is going to be hyper investing in that movement unit because they're going to have the highest amount of longevity in this game and therefore require the highest level of investment. These people would largely be skipping the majority of the characters until you get the next movement unit who is going to be the best one in the game, and therefore then they would spend all of their pulls going for them, as well as the majority of their pinnacle energy. Now, a lot of you are probably going to be watching this up to this point and be a little bit concerned on your viability in clearing modes such as the Expanse if you are going to be skipping one of the featured units going forward, or even skipping multiple of them. I'd say the level of difficulty in the Expanse, even after the nerfs to the characters, is not so high that if you have a well-built unit that you would not be able to clear it. And while the people who are alternating are largely going to have an easier time clearing their main side of the Expanse, they might have a bit more of a difficult time with the alternate sides. There's also the movement unit who may be further restricted by modifiers in the Expanse, or even the arenas themselves, such as what we've already seen when it comes to Ningfei in the current Piercing Expanse. But like I said before, the main goal is simply just to get the sub 7-minute clear, because the performance in Calamity Ops is significantly more important than that of in the Expanse. From what we've already observed, it's not going to be entirely unlikely to see characters who are necessarily not as good as a top unit in Calamity Ops still be able to perform extremely well in Expanse, especially if they work well with the cards. So for instance, units such as Tantu and Yolder work really well with the rapid fire weapon cards that are in the current Expanse, especially when compared to the ability Expanse before, where Estella was significantly better. So it would be a lot more likely to have a, let's say, less well-built unit clearing this Expanse, or a standard banner unit from before who would likely have been power crept at that point in the future that we were talking about, being able to clear the expanse and even being able to clear the expanse well. Even then, going forward, if we do get to a point where the power creep has completely outsized the original cast of this title, you would likely have enough previous mythic units built up to still be able to compete even in expanses where you are not necessarily on the correct Shinka or on the correct element. I mean, we have a Tantu in the top 3 of the current expanse because he does actually work pretty well with the solar rapid fire cards that are currently available here. Now, that's about it for this video covering what I believe is the best way to plan for future Calamity Opses, especially with your team members. Obviously, there were a couple of assumptions that we unfortunately have to operate on, such as when it comes to power creep and how much they are essentially pushing the newest units when it comes to the current Calamity Ops. It's very likely that any rapid fire unit is largely going to be outshined by Ningfei until they release a new movement unit who is better than Ningfei, and then rapid fire limiteds who not necessarily as mobile as Ningfei, but perhaps as strong as Estella with a little bit more mobility than she has, may have a bit more of a place in future Calamity Opses and expanses, but that of course is something that we will have to wait and see. I do think that it is going to be the best option to save your materials and to save your pulls for future units, especially if your own personal role within your teams in the current Calamity Ops does not include the most recent unit. And again, this is a guide primarily for the people who maybe not necessarily are trying to compete for top positions, because those people don't really need a guide in the first place, but more so for the people who may be struggling in this kind of planning phase of Calamity Ops, perhaps due to the fact that they invested in a wider cast of units rather than investing deeper into a single one, finding other people who have done the same. Thankfully, we are still very early into this game, so if this advice helps you catch up rather quickly by planning for future runs, then I'd be really happy for climb up to those master ranks and get even more cores and clusters. If you're enjoying my coverage of this game and would like to see more, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And also, if you are enjoying Destiny Rising, but are also looking for other games to play, especially in dry periods such as right now, I would recommend you check out Duet Night Abyss, and it is also a game that I am covering on this channel as well. If that also interests you, be sure to subscribe for content on that game coming very soon. If any of these tips helped you, or if I told you something that you didn't necessarily think about, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, especially if there was a particular piece of advice that resonated with you. Also, if you are looking for dedicated people who are wanting to run Calamity Ops, I would definitely recommend checking out my Discord as well, linked in the description down below. There are plenty of people who are passionate about this game who do want to climb up into those higher ranks of Calamity Ops for the simple fact that they do actually like playing the characters and want to build them and use them in the endgame activities that this game has to offer. With that all out of the way, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next time.